Now, we will talk a little bit about the basics of something called system design and architecture for PMs. Let's talk about the basics of system design and architecture for PMs. Now, for all of us who come from product management and non-engineering background, it is important to understand to build our technical skills. Sometimes knowing the technical bar for PM starts and it is the easiest part. Okay, so there is a three-tier architecture in a software product consists of. Number one is called presentation layer. Second is called application layer. Third is called the data layer. Presentation layer is typically the UI layer. What I mean by UI is HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery. They all come in the presentation layer, the first layer. Any UI that you see on the app is called as the presentation layer. Second is called the application layer. Application layer is the backend where the business resides. Now, the backend where it resides, the presentation layer can communicate to the application layer via APIs, and we'll talk about what an API is, right? And the third layer is the data layer, where all the information of a particular app or whatever information that you capture that gets stored in the database. Now, is this clear? There are three types of layers in any system. The first layer is called the presentation layer, the UI layer, where HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery, they all resides. It is separate. It's the first layer. The second layer is called the application layer, which is basically where the business logic resides. And there, any logic, like for example, you are typically signing up on Flipkart. What are the different criteria for somebody to sign up, to give email, to give phone number, etc.? All of those logic resides in the application layer. And the last layer is the database layer, where somebody who has signed up, the information of all of that particular user gets stored in the database. Now, these three layers there is a concept which is called separation of concerns. It's a design principle for separating a computer program into distinct sections. Like alag-alag sections mein tum separation of concerns ko karoge. For example, let's assume, like agar tumne kal ko business logic change ho gaya, so it doesn't mean that the presentation layer will also change. For example, if you go to Flipkart as a website, the presentation layer shows the sign up form, right? Now in the application layer, you change the logic and say that now I don't require email ID and it is optional. If you change the logic in the application layer, it should not affect the presentation layer, nor it should affect the data layer. This concept is called separations of concerns. Like for example, changing the user interface should not change the business logic and vice versa. So separation of concerns ka matlab hota hai ki think of it as three different types of systems. Let me just quickly share my screen and tell you what I'm talking about. So first is presentation layer, UI layer. Second is application layer, business logic. Third is data layer, data to be captured. Now, if I make any change here, it should not change the logic. Logic remains same. Logic remains same. If I make any change here, logic remains same. Logic remains same. So by changing the logic in any of the three layers, right, it should not affect the other two layers. That is something that is called as separation of concerns. Separation of concerns basically means any change in any of the three layers does not affect the remaining layers. Amazing. Amazing. Now, next step. अब ये तो समझ में आ गया आपको कि तीन लेयर्स हैं, एक यूआई लेयर है, एक एप्लीकेशन लेयर है, एक डेटा लेयर है. द नेक्स्ट स्टेप इज टू स्केल, राइट? इन ऑर्डर टू स्केल you need 2-3 things. One, the client side. Second, client basically means the app that you're using. Second, the web server, and simultaneously the database. Like for example, कल को हमारे पास 1000 यूजर आ रहे थे, 1000 से we scale to 10,000. So it should not happen that when people are hitting your client or when people are using your app, the web server, the web on which the application logic resides, it should get overwhelmed. Absolutely. So what you typically do is you create a list of servers. The logic is that all of your presentation layer resides on the application that you're using, like WhatsApp that you're using, right? Now, anybody who sends a message on WhatsApp, it goes to the web server, right? And we have created a server jahan pe hum logic bana ke rakhte hain ki any message that should go on WhatsApp from one person, it should eventually go to the web server and eventually it should reach towards the other client, right? Now, but what happens if tomorrow you scale from 10,000 users to 1 lakh users, right? There, in that case, you typically create a list of servers, list of multiple servers, and these servers are typically routed to different servers through this concept called a load balancer, right? Like, for example, I'll quickly share my screen again. Now, here what will happen is your web server is your backend. Number of users 10. If we scale the number of users to 10 million, we will not need just one web server. We will need web server 1, web server 2, web server 3. And what will happen is here there will come a load balancer. The load balancer will automatically send 5 lakh 50,000 users to one server, 40,000 users to another server, 10,000 users to another server. And this is what a load balancer does. So in the case when you have multiple people on the servers, you typically need something called a load balancer to direct traffic. And it will handle a fraction. Multiple servers will have multiple types of loads, right? So now you have a cluster of web servers through which, and application server is basically the web server only, but each request that comes from a user may be routed to a different server, right? Now what will happen is, now the question is that if different requests are routing to different servers, how will a server, like for example, server 1 got a request that Shravan is a user. Now next time Shravan sends a request, the request goes to server 2. How will server 2 know that Shravan is already a user? Give me a sense, give me a yes or no. How will server 2 know that Shravan has sent already a request and it is already on server 1? So they think there are 100 requests that are going. Shravan initially sent a request which went to server 1 and server 1 got it validated. Now the second part, that next time Shravan sends a request, it goes to server 2. How will server 2 know that Shravan has already sent a request to server 1? So in this case, what you do is your database maintains the state. Do you understand what I mean by that? So there are 3 layers. First is application layer, second is the server layer, third is the DB layer. Yes. So server 2 will absolutely. Servers can talk to each other, or there can be a possibility that your state of sign up is maintained in the DB. So even if the server 2 does not know, it automatically takes information from the DB and understands that Shravan is already a user for this particular application, for Flipkart, right? And so what do you learn from this? You learn that the state of a particular user can only be maintained in a DB. Yes, absolutely correct. So again, I'm repeating. You start from, let's assume you were a user for Flipkart. You signed up a request. Server 1 recognized that you have signed up. Next time when you sign up, it goes to server 2. Server 2 does not know, but server 2 knows that your state, that you are already a signed up user, already resides in the DB. It will go to the DB and bring information from the DB and automatically can showcase it to the client, and you will be signed up. The importance of being stateless. State basically means ensuring that the value prop or the data is already covered. The importance of being stateless primarily refers to the server side of things. The database is an appropriate state where you can maintain the database is the appropriate place to maintain the state. And most holistic systems are stateful. Otherwise, you would not be able to fill your shopping cart at Amazon, because at every page click, it will forget who you are. So the key to being stateless in the web server, which is serving your APIs, 2 places are there where you can maintain the state. The first place is called the database, so that you are maintaining all your states in a particular database. The first part is that in order to maintain the state, the information is located in the server. The second place where you can maintain a state is through browser via cookies. Lot of times you see that when you sign up in Chrome browser, automatically the URLs are already published, because your information is getting stored in a cookie. It is important to remember that cookies are not the single source of truth. Cookies are user dependent. So the best way to store the state is in a DB, which is a single source of truth. in order to maintain the state. That's why all of these companies, why do these companies like Flipkart, Amazon want you to sign up every time? Because they want to maintain your state in a particular DB. They don't want guest users. Ideally, any company like Flipkart, Amazon do not want guest users. They want to maintain your state in a DB. Awesome. Awesome. Now, another thing that you want to understand is you can handle a bunch of requests, but what if your data center catches fire? What does happen? In that case, what do? What if you sent a request, your states are maintained in a DB, but what if your data center catches fire? What will happen then? Yes, absolutely. So what you typically do is you create a cluster of databases, right? And in order to maintain that cluster of databases, you also use something called as a CDN, or a content delivery network, which basically means that your information is sharded into multiple databases, and a CDN is a cluster of servers which maintains certain little information. So you want to, what if, and that is something that you do in a process which is typically called as sharding, which is you break down the current database also into sub databases, and the sub databases maintain a replica of information which is currently needed. Absolutely. Is this clear to you guys, that what if your data center catches fire? In that case, you have created sub DBs which are called DB shards, in which your information is fundamentally retained. Another thing that you want to understand is, okay, now your database and everything is working fine. For example, if your DB is located in Oregon in US and you are putting from Mumbai, it will take a lot of time for the request to get covered. So in order to, for us to make the request, basically a request from the Flipkart application to actually the user, if in order to make it very, very simple, you use something called as a CDN, a content delivery network, which basically means that your current server is not exactly a single server. It is a list of multiple servers, one located in Mumbai, one located in Oregon, one located in Chennai, one located in Delhi, right? So that from where the user is sending a request, the information can be brought very, very fast. And this is done by CDN. CDNs are of multiple times. Amazon has its own CDN. Tata has its own CDN. Multiple. So CDN is a cluster of servers, cluster of network servers, which minimize the latency of a user from where the user is actually sending a request. The next thing that you have to understand is a CDN is a system of geographically located servers which provide fast delivery of internet content. Does that make, yahan tak baat samajh mein aa gayi ki what is a CDN? Give me a yes or no, guys. If everybody, a CDN is a network of geographically located distributed servers that work together to give you the delivery of the fast content, right? Yahan tak baat samajh mein aa gayi, what is a CDN? Besides the CDN, we also retain information in the cache. Cache is in-memory data. What I mean by in-memory data is that, like there is a RAM, there is a ROM, right? In a typical computer, there is random access memory, there is read-only memory. RAM is something which is in memory, which is stored on the computer, and it is very less, it's very, very expensive, and it is where the most important tasks are done by the computer. Like a lot of times when you take a Mac, you say 8 GB RAM hai sir, 256 GB ROM hai. In that case, there is another structure, an open source in-memory data store, which is called Redis, on which all the information is actually stored and information can be retrieved fast. A lot of times you hear this word called Redis cache. Redis is, again, it's an in-memory data store which is used in order to retrieve information from the RAM of the particular web server that you're looking at. Think of it like this. I will again create an architecture. Client on top. Client sends the request to web server. Web server CDN. It will go, the request go to the nearest CDN. Just between these two, there is Redis. So major important information comes from Redis. Now, think of it like this. The client sent a request. It went to the Redis cache. If the Redis cache has the request, the information will go from there only. or else it will go to the web server. The web server will automatically choose the load balancer, or the load distributor will automatically figure out which is the nearest web server, and the information from that will be distributed back to the client, and you see a WhatsApp message. So think of it, I will repeat again. You are using WhatsApp. व्हाट्सएप से आपने मैसेज किया, वो मैसेज पहले जाएगी आपके वेब सर्वर पे, वेब सर्वर की रेडिस कैश से पता चलेगा कि whether that information is already stored in the cache. If it's in the cache, the information will be retrieved from Redis. अगर नहीं है, it will go to the web server. Web server automatically, the load balancer will automatically figure out which is the closest web server on which the logic can be put across. It will then go to the CDN. The CDN will talk to the DB, and your message which you sent will go to Anmol, will go to the other partner. The full stack किसको बोला जाता है? Client, web server, CDN and database. This is typically called as a full stack. यहां तक बात पूरी clear हो गई? Amazing. Now, what you have to understand, यहां तक मैंने आपको जो भी बातें बताई, these are मतलब like primarily relevant for you to understand as a PM. This will never come in real life. अब ये सारी चीजें जो भी तुमने समझी, this is all to understand basically what a PM does, right? Now, but based on this understanding, these are some of the questions that a PM should ask when they're interacting with tech.